to First Strike on VSiN. I'm your host, Dave Ross. For the next hour, we're going to break down everything from the very exciting card here in Las Vegas tomorrow night. To help me do that, Lou Finocchiaro is going to join us in studio in a matter of minutes. Dan Vreeland, Reed Kuhn, and our producer extraordinaire, Britton Hess, with Britton's Bombs later on in the program as we break down this card. But without further ado, let's bring in the man coming in from Arizona to come out here to Sin City for the weekend. Always a pleasure to have Lou Finocchiaro join us in studio here at Circus Sportsbook. Lou, welcome back to the program. Wait, we always talk each and every week, but to have you in studio is a special treat, my friend. We know it's a great card. We say this every week in non-pay-per-views. One, you're going to find angles that I know that you like in this card. And two, you're going to find some pretty exciting matchups. And the main event to me, Cory Sandhagen right now, minus $1.90 for the Sandman here against Song Yadong at plus 160 in the comeback there. Pretty intriguing matchup. We talked about it on Tuesday, First Strike, First Look. Has your opinion changed at all after the weigh-ins today on a Friday?
No, I really, Dave, I think that in this main event, you have a dynamic clash of styles with Yadong being the fighter, who, by the way, is only 24 years old, compiled and 10-1 record in the UFC, impressive at that age, and he had to fight some fights to get here. So he's been learning as he goes, but he steps in against a guy with length, footwork, experience, 5-round championship experience, and that's where the angles for Sandhagen lie. Now, the path for victory for Yadong is to get inside, work the body, slow him down, and make this a fight in a phone booth, if you will. Can Yadong be able to do that? In his fight against Kyler Phillips, he struggled with the more fluid, more athletic footwork of Phillips, and that's where he's going to be challenged against a real long string bean of a guy in Sandhagen who's able to not only put combinations together, but has dynamic wrestling. Sandhagen folding potential wrestling in could really keep Yadong off balance here. And I think this is a big, big step up for the Chinese fighter, Song Yadong.
You mentioned his age at 24. Normally we go, well, advantage younger fighter, but Cory's right in his prime here at the age of 30. And you do think because you're hopping up in that competition level, does Sandhagen want to extend this fight into those championship rounds and take the younger fighter into deeper waters?
I think Sandhagen would take the submission in 30 seconds if he could get it. But Yadong is strong and determined and motivated and really well put together. And so I think this is going to take some time for anyone to quell Yadong. And I think that over 4.5 is how I see the fight. And so to try and squeeze or get some value out of this fight, to me, I think it's the Sandhagen via decision plus 120. That's where I would go in a fight where I think Yadong kind of earns his stripes and Sandhagen displays to the rest of the bantamweights that, yes, he's in the top 3 of the division.
Yeah, I'm picking up what you're putting down there. Find that plus price tag here in Sandhagen via decision of plus $1.20. If you think the fight will go the distance, which, Lou, you clearly do, if you're out there and you're wavering on a side, just for the fight to go the decision is minus $1.50. So take that for what it's worth as well. You know, a lot of times when they hit the cards, and we think this main event could potentially hit the cards, before we look ahead to the rest of the card, I do want to look back a little bit to UFC 279 last week, because we saw the chaos that kind of befell that card, if you will, with so many fighters missing weight. And you do a great job of watching these fighters on certainly on weigh-in days like today. If this fight goes to the cards, what do you think the judges are looking at? Because there were a couple fights last week that I think maybe some people thought the judges got it wrong.
The judges' criteria is clear. It's printed and published and available for all to see. The fact that we as viewers sometimes don't understand that is our fault, not the judges' faults. But you have to understand that there has to be not only a control of position, but there has to be damage and destruction in control. So if I'm the wrestler and I'm going to lay and pray on top of you, but I'm not going to drop ground and pound or do any damage, then I may get some credit for position, but nothing for effect. And damage and effect is clearly their key words in this document. So we need to brush ourselves up on the criteria. The judges, I thought, last week actually did a pretty darn good job because I've been reading these documents or these rules and trying to make sense of what these judges have been doing.
Yeah, I think the fight in question for a lot of people out there that were referring to the Leach against D-Rod, and apparently they might even be running that fight back. Very close decision that goes for D-Rod, and I know that a lot of people that had the Leach last week go, wait a minute, I got the right side of it, and again, I was like, wow. Sometimes you end up on the right side in a close fight. And again, this is what we say when they hit the cards, hold your breath a little bit because they might not see the fight the way you do.
Yeah, but you can't apologize for a winner. That said, the Leach took this fight on hours' notice against a guy that weighed in 10 pounds heavier than him that day. So we tipped the cat to the Leach. You watch. Tip the cap. The Leach is going to get awarded, some very nominal type fight in a big position where he's going to be able to get a fight of the night bonus. They will reward him. The eminent domain that is the UFC and expansion into China is real, and they will take care of those Chinese fighters.
I totally am picking up what you're putting down there. The co-main event of this evening is a fight that might not hit the cards, and we'll just say RoboCop against Chidi in this one. Maybe enough said there. Do you expect this fight here in the co-main event here for these big boys and these heavy hitters to potentially be a quicker night or maybe a little bit longer than people were anticipating?
Boy, what a great question. I'm afraid that this fight is going to play out 1 round and 2 rounds. And by that, I mean, Chidi is the much more explosive, flashy fighter that enters with tremendous momentum, and he has unbelievable power. Greg Rodriguez, tremendous power, but a little bit more direct, a little bit more plodding, not as quick and explosive, but he has tremendous cardio and an unbelievable grappling Brazilian jiu-jitsu acumen. And so in this fight, I think what we're going to see is a first round where Chidi is maybe even got Rodriguez wobbly. The key for Rodriguez is to get this fight to the second round and take Chidi where he doesn't want to be physically, tire him out. More importantly, get him to the ground. Nakajuani has no ground game. If Greg Rodriguez and his camp have trained appropriately, that will be their goal. I just don't think he's going to be able to effectively get him to the dirt until that second round.
So that's an interesting scenario there. And again, for the fight to go the distance, plus $1.80. But if you think that RoboCop here, Rodriguez, extends, and Chidi, we know he's got the reach advantage, right? So he's going to try to keep everything on the end of his punches. If Rodriguez does utilize that ground game, I wonder if some of these props might come into play, i.e. submission plus 450 or ground and pound KO, TK, or DQ plus 250. He is a plus dog anyway. Would you dabble in a prop, Lou, or just stick with the plus money that he wins the fight and not necessarily sure the manner in which he gets it done?
No, I love where you're going there, and I don't often double him up, but I do like Greg Rodriguez more on an inside the distance kind of call, which you can find at DraftKings. It's usually packaged inside the distance or TKO, KO, DQ. Excuse me. It's usually packaged not inside the distance, but to win via finish or to not win via finish. So Rodriguez, I think inside the distance is a really good opportunity because I do believe that he has the grit to get this into the second round and take the wind and steam from Chidi.
That should be one heck of a co-main event in that one. Again, we've talked a little bit about it. You and I did on Tuesday, First Strike, First Look. The card is filled with names that a lot of fans that love the sport are going to go, wow. You don't expect it. Maybe Tanner Bozer, in his matchup. You got Andre Touchy-Feely back in there against Bill Algeo here on the main card. You got Fluffy Hernandez back in this card. On the main card, Lou, is there any other fights here that really have caught your attention here on a Friday after the weigh-ins that maybe you think you have a lean towards?
I do, and that would be the other heavyweight fight, or I should say the heavyweight fight, Bozer against Nascimento. And this is a typical fight of when you see these two guys stand next to each other, you're going to be shocked that they're even in the same weight class. But it's not the size of the dog in the fight. It's the size of the fight in the dog. And Bozer has been tremendously underrated, in my opinion. Here's a guy that went 5 strong rounds with Cyril Gane. Now, he's taken a couple losses in between now and then. He's gotten over some injuries. But his game is footwork and speed and duration. He's got all-day cardio, and he's going to have to navigate Nascimento and not allow Nascimento to get a hold of him for a round. But this is Bozer's fight. Bozer opened 220. He's now down to 170, and he's dropping. Let's let him keep coming in on Nascimento. But my advice is be patient and take a long, hard look at Bozer, and I wouldn't be afraid of him inside the distance either, or TKO, KO, DQ.
So let's see, that number keeps coming down on the Canadian here. You know, it's amazing because we talk a lot about missing weight and these sort of things. You're giving up 30 pounds in this fight, and yet we never talk about that in the heavyweight division. We talk about it in all the other divisions.
Yeah, we don't see it a lot in the heavyweight division like this, but that's a huge weight difference. And so Bozer better make sure he keeps this standing for the first 5 minutes and tire that big man out.
Got about 45 seconds left, Lou. Again, I follow you on Twitter at Gamblu. Great insight there, but also the Bout Business podcast. Tell the people what they get when they listen.
What they get is 16, 17 minutes of each UFC's card final releases, according to me. We publish them wherever podcasts are presented on Friday afternoon, and we keep tabs and run the total. I want to just take a minute to say thank you guys for having me on this outstanding show. You have 3 or 4 different handicapping perspectives plus yours to draw upon, and I'm flattered to be able to be on. Thanks so much.
Great to have you here, Lou, as always, and my mom and dad's favorite back in Virginia Beach. We try not to play favorites, but Lou, great having you in studio, as always. When we come back, Dan Vreeland's going to join the program. Come on back. It's VSiN, the Sports Betting Network. DraftKings Sportsbook is giving you plenty of ways to bet the UFC. Just download the DraftKings Sportsbook app. You're going to be able to bet on more than just the main event. DraftKings has great odds on fight lines, total rounds, and futures for all MMA events. Eligibility restrictions to apply. See DraftKings.com/sportsbook for the full terms and conditions. We roll on here on First Strike on VSiN. Dave Ross here back at Circus Sportsbook. Great to be joined once again by Dan Vreeland. You can follow him on Twitter as I do at Gumby Vreeland. Dan, here we go again, my friend, where you get off of UFC 279, you turn the page to the next week, you think you might get some clunkers. We got some really interesting fights out here on this very deep fight card, down to 13 fights on this fight card. I want to go to the prelims and a couple fights that I'm looking at here and see if I can get your thoughts on them. Maria Agapova against Jillian Robertson is a very intriguing fight to me. And right now, Robertson is a minus $1.45 betting favorite here at DraftKings. What do you make of Agapova at plus $1.25 in this lightweight matchup? Is she a live dog in your eyes?
You know, it's kind of interesting. I had this one circled when I saw it booked as her being a live dog. And I hate to do this, but I actually interviewed her this week. And, you know, just cheap plug here for my podcast, but I interviewed her this week. She actually still needs knee surgery right now. Oh. And while she said she's fighting through all of that and giving us, you know, kind of the company message that she's good to go and she's going to be fine and she's at her very best self, even though she needs that knee surgery, you have to wonder if the same Maria Agapova who had trouble with Marina Moraz's takedowns is going to have even more trouble with somebody like Jillian Robertson. Now, granted, Robertson's a little bit more one-dimensional than Marina Moraz is. She doesn't have to worry about the striking. And quite frankly, I think Maria Agapova is a far better striker than Jillian Robertson. But when you consider all the takedowns she gave up and really the issues with the submission defense, and now adding the injury worry to the back of my mind, you know, I hate to make a play based solely on, you know, what I heard in an interview one time, but like this one feels like one where I just don't want to lay down on somebody who I know who has got issues with their knee. Now, on the other side, I've seen Robertson's number come down a little bit. She was a little bit higher to steer at less than $1.50. Starting to feel good about that. And in addition to that, I would say the prop number on her getting a submission, because if she does get her down, that's probably where it's going. I'm seeing that pretty close to 2.5. Mm-hmm. And really, I really do like that in that spot if you're looking for something to get, you know, in this game.
Well, Dan, I think that's exactly why it's great to have you on the program, because sometimes you can glean a lot from talking to the fighters. I know back in my time in Chicago, talking to Jessica I a couple times where she basically disclosed she just wasn't that healthy. It is hard to back some of these fighters when that's a significant injury when we're talking about potential knee surgery. So I think that's very important information to get out there. And you do a great job talking to those fighters. Let's keep on the undercard here, and let's go to the very first fight here with Nicholas Mata against Cameron Van Camp here. What do you make of this bout here at the lightweight division where Van Camp right now plus $1.60, Mata, the sizable favorite here, minus $1.90?
First of all, I think Mata is just the better fighter overall. Like, I think he's quicker on the feet. I think he controls range better. I am a little bit worried about his chin, though. Obviously, Jim Miller late in his career has shown that he's got the power, right? Like, he somehow summoned some sort of old man power and some boxing skills we never knew he had and knocked out Mota. But, obviously, concussions are not one and done. And, if somebody softer hits me, then I don't have to worry about it. They're cumulative. So I worry about that with Mota's chin a little bit. And I worry about the fact that Van Camp kind of touched up Andre Fiallo in that fight, kind of stunned him a little bit. And if you got power enough to stun Fiallo, you probably got power enough to take out Mota. But with all that being said, I do really just think Mota kind of dances around him and plays safe enough here that, Van Camp's going to throw the big bombs and Van Camp's going to go after it. But, at the end of the day, I think Mota's more well-rounded. And as long as he doesn't run into that right hand, I think he should.
All right, so minus $1.90, sized and priced appropriately according to Dan. I like where your head's at there. We mentioned the first ladies fight. There were supposed to be 3 in the card. We are down to 2 now. So the other fight will be Denise Gomez against Loma Lookboonmee. When you look at this fight here, Loma's a big, sizable favorite against Gomez. Gomez plus $1.75 here, and Loma, about $2 favorite here, $2.05 now at DraftKings. Is this one, in your eyes, priced accordingly?
Yeah, I think it's priced accordingly. And in fact, I do really like the prop of Lookboonmee by decision. Neither of these women particularly big finishers. You got Gomez coming off the Contender Series, taking this on short notice. And we've really seen a low percentage of fighters do well on short notice fights. I don't have the number directly in front of me, but I believe it's right around a third of a fighters win coming on short notice. And this one's going to be on really short notice, coming fresh off of a fight where, I'll be honest, I wasn't really impressed with Denise Gomez versus high-end Amanda on Contender Series. Amanda took her down. Amanda kind of controlled. Amanda definitely won the second round, and she wasn't a fighter I felt particularly high on in the first place. So for the fact that she's coming off of a fight very recent, didn't look particularly great in it. And let's face it, Lookboonmee, despite being a little bit small, has been phenomenal in the UFC. She's great in the clinch. She's got great tie work. She's even got nice little trips in there. I think she's going to control the fight here, but I really think the play is, as a lot of women's strawweight fights, is whatever fighter you like by decision.
And again, at the Apex here in Las Vegas, you got a smaller octagon in there, so look for some clinches there and possibly some control, and that normally does lead itself to certainly going the overs and possibly hitting the cards in a 3-round fight. Trevin Giles is a fighter that, Dan, I look at and I go, I still don't know what to expect from Trevin Giles, and I'm looking at a lot of the prices, certainly in the prelims. They're not out of control. We don't see these $4 or $5 favorites here, but Trevin's one of the bigger ones here, minus 210, now at 30 years of age. What do you make of Trevin in this spot as one of the bigger favorites on the prelims?
Yeah, I think it's crazy because I'm actually all over Louis Kosuke in this fight. I really think he's got a really great potential. He's been away for 2 years, which is why I think you see that price driven up the way it was. And to be honest, the one fight we've seen him in the UFC didn't look all that great. But what I think a lot of people remember about that fight is the fact that he tired out and he looked bad in the third round, but they tend to forget he looked like a man possessed in the first round. He had Sasha Paletnikov on skate. He looked like he was going to finish, and the problem was he didn't control himself when he was going to finish, and then he gassed out. And if you look back to his time on Contender Series where he knocked a guy out, or any of his regional fights for that matter, the dude has exceptional knockout power. And what we've seen lately out of Trevin Giles is a chin that I don't necessarily trust. And as you kind of mentioned before, he's also a guy who, I don't know what to make of him because it seems like sometimes he's got kind of a low fight IQ when it comes to fights. I think back, the Gerald Meerschaert fight sticks in my brain because I was right cage side for it. And he's doing great in that fight, and it looks like he's waltzing to a win, and suddenly he's grappling with Gerald Meerschaert by his own volition. And that is a scary prospect, the fact that he chose to do that, because nobody wants to grapple with Gerald Meerschaert.
No.
And so now he's got Louis Kosuke in front of him. I feel like he's just going to stand and throw hands with him. I think it's a dangerous mistake because I think Kosuke hits like a truck. And I think we're going to be surprised a little bit on the fact that, maybe the largest favorite on the undercard winds up looking like he's probably shouldn't be that.
And Kosuke, by the way, KO, TKO, or DQ prop with those hands, plus $4. So could be a way possibly there if you like the underdog in that spot. Before I get to the main event, very quickly, the last fight in the prelims, Damon Jackson against Pat Sabatini. What do you make of this matchup here before we get to the main card?
This one's tough for me for a couple of reasons. Number one, I'm big on the Daniel Gracie guys. You know, Joe Pyfer, who's on this card, I'm big on. I love Sean Brady. I'm a huge Sean Brady fan. And Pat Sabatini is one of those guys. But the problem with Sabatini is I've seen him get stuffed on a lot of his takedowns before. So while I am backing him in this fight, because I do think he's a little sharper than Damon Jackson on the feet, my big concern is that his biggest strength is his takedown game, is his top control game. And so, I think he's not going to get any of that going against Damon Jackson, especially because he didn't get it going against Tristan Connolly. So you ain't getting it going against Connolly. You ain't getting it going against Damon Jackson. I think he probably edges him out on the feet because, I just don't think Damon Jackson is as good of a boxer as him. But for me, this one's kind of a pass because, having a guy who I like in the fight, but is really having his best weapons taken away, it's just going to scare me off of it altogether.
Maybe a stay away spot there for the favorite here on Sabatini at that price point. Let's get to the main event very quickly. Got about 90 seconds to go here. Sandhagen against Yadong should be a very intriguing fight, obviously juiced to the over 4.5 rounds. Do you think this one hits the cards, and do you think at $1.90 there's still any value there in Cory?
I actually think it's the under that I really like here. And I think that Cory Sandhagen is the pick here. And I think he gets it done inside the distance. The reason why he's looked so good in 5-round fights. Some people arguing he actually beat TJ Dillashaw in that fight. He looked better as the fight went on. He really looked good with Piotr Jan over a 5-round fight. And now we're talking about a guy in Song Yadong who throws big bombs early and who likes to get the fight done early. I don't think he's got a lot of late round experience. And when he does, look at that Kyler Murray fight. Kyler Murray, Kyler the Matrix. Why am I forgetting his last name? Kyler the Matrix, whatever it is. Yeah. Phillips. Thank you. Kyler Phillips really wore him out and kept taking him down late in the fight. So with all that being said, I'm worried that Song Yadong is just going to be absolutely gassed come the 4th and the 5th round. I like Sandhagen to finish it inside of there.
I'd go Kyler Phillips or Kyler Murray. I'd like to see Kyler Murray in the octagon. That'd be interesting. Hey, Dan, really appreciate the time breaking down those undercards for us. Really appreciate that. Enjoy the fights. And again, very quickly, about 10 seconds, where can they find your podcast?
So you can find my podcast pretty much anywhere you see podcasts. That's Top Turtle MMA. You can just do a search for that. You can also find them on Twitter at Top Turtle MMA as well.
Dan, really appreciate the info as always. When we come back, Reed Kuhn is going to join us right here in First Strike on VSiN, the Sports Betting Network. Start your morning with VSiN's new podcast, VSiN Daily Morning Bets. Josh Applebaum gives you every piece of info you need to be ready for betting the day's biggest games in just 15 minutes. He discusses line movement, injuries, and what you're going to need to be looking for to make all of your bets. Make the VSiN Daily Morning Bets podcast part of your morning routine. Download and subscribe wherever you get your podcast. Dave Ross back here at Circus Sportsbook. A pleasure to be joined each and every week by Reed Kuhn. Back home in Washington, D.C., but last week, Reed, it was great to have you out here in Las Vegas for UFC 279. What's it like for you when you leave Vegas, you come in here, you take the town by storm, and then go back to the friendly confines of home in D.C.? How different is it for you preparing for fights here versus back home?
Definitely different. Usually because I'm far more sleep deprived in Las Vegas, but this time it's because I've been on a whirlwind tour. I just flew in from New York today, and then 48 hours I'm off to Barcelona for a sports betting conference because I'm going to be presenting on that. So, it's been a whirlwind, but Vegas, I can manage it once or twice a year.
Wait. You're bearing the lead here. Wait, you're going to Barcelona for a sports betting conference where you'll be speaking. Can the people access this? Because this sounds like something I got to see.
It's an industry conference, so it's going to be like all the tech platforms and the betting platforms of Europe. So I'll be going over there to explain to them best practices of using apps, mobile apps, and things like that. stealing all the playbook that I do here in the tech world.
That is absolutely fascinating. And for the record, I've never been invited to Barcelona to speak about anything. Let's get to the card this week, because I think there are some profitable avenues that you have figured out here, certainly with the numbers that you get, to the great numbers you give us each and every week. Let's go right to the top here, because this Cory Sandhagen Song Yadong fight is pretty intriguing. Obviously, normally, Reed, I know the model's going to like the younger fighter, but I wonder now at 24, is he almost too young against a guy like Sandhagen, who you have a lot of volume on, certainly in 5-round fights, and maybe hitting his prime at 30? What are the numbers telling you?
Yeah, well, first of all, I do think this will be a striking duel. Neither guy really goes for a lot of takedowns. If anybody is going to initiate the contact, it might be Sandhagen. He has slightly more takedown attempts, but generally both guys are way below average. So do expect them to go toe-to-toe and just trade for rounds. I think Sandhagen, though, he is more accurate. He is busier. Those are going to be the edges here. Even though Song is he might be a hard hitter. He has more knockdowns, actually, 5 knockdowns compared to 4. But Sandhagen is so rangy, and he's very good at using his range. So he fights long. Now, that said, I basically agree with Sandhagen as a favorite here. He's, flirting with minus 200. I don't see a lot of value in that line, though. It's actually close enough for me to back off. Maybe if I'm, doing the parlays and the promos, I'll throw Sandhagen in there. But the better bet for me is just an over. Take a conservative over like 2.5. I do expect this to take a while to play out. With 5 rounders, I don't like going all the way the distance, because I've been burned by that a few times, these late finishes. But I do think it will be a while to develop. And I like Sandhagen, probably in a decision, but at least over the 2.5.
I think, Reed, what you're giving there to the viewer and the listener is certainly good information, that you don't have to play the 4.5, which is juiced heavily to the over at minus $1.75. Yes, you're going to have to give up more juice, but if it gets dicey later on, potentially in this fight, as it gets to the championship rounds, which Yadong might not be, as used to, certainly as Sandhagen is, then you can go for a different one, a 2.5 or a 3.5 round prop out there. That might be the safer way to go than playing the 4.5. So I certainly like where your head's at there. I want to go a little bit on this main card, and a fight we haven't talked a whole lot about, but it really is intriguing, and that's touchy-feely here. Andre Fili back in there against Bill Algeo. It feels like Algeo is a fighter that some people have been fading at their own peril, and now he's plus $1.10 against the guy you would think would have more experience in Fili, but you look at the ages here, 33 for Algeo, 32 for Fili. Very close when you look at, 74-inch reach for Fili, 73 for Algeo here. And certainly the height just 1 inch off here. Pretty evenly matched by those metrics. What are the other metrics telling you?
Well, the other metric, first of all, that jumps out at me is 193 minutes of cage time for Fili, only 67 for Algeo. So clearly Fili is the more experienced guy. He's also been in with some experienced talent, so pretty big name. So you got to give him the experience edge. And he came into the sport pretty young. And looked kind of green. I think back in the day, the early days, this is now maybe 10 years ago when I ran into him at the Fan Expo. But he's a good rangy striker, kind of like Sandhagen. He fights very long. He also has some wrestling. He started at Alpha Male. So he's going to have some interesting grappling. But this is one where, similar on paper, if you look at the traditional tail of the tape, I think there's enough things lining up for Fili. I would take him as the favorite. It's a very affordable favorite, practically even money, very close, but I would give a slight edge to Fili. Also, I might go the under here. I'm surprised too. This is one of those situations where the model comes out and you're going to get plus money on any under inside the distance. I'll actually take that plus money. That might be the bigger bet here.
And how about that, Reed? Plus $2 under 2.5 rounds here. So I'm with you. Feel like he can be in some wild fights as we've seen in the past. So could be some value there under 2.5 if somebody gets this fight stopped a little bit sooner than people do expect. And by the way, Andre Fili, he does some stand-up in the comedy market there. And I believe you have done some as well. I'm not classically trained. I wish I had that skill set like you guys have. I want to go to Rodrigo Nascimento here against Tanner Boser. And this is an interesting line move here that it feels like it's been coming down. We've seen most of these favorites. They normally get bet up is what we normally see here, getting closer and closer to fight day. Boser's actually come down now to $1.70. What do you make of that move? And what are the numbers showing you here in this heavyweight matchup?
Well, there's more data on Boser, and he's been one of those hit or miss heavyweights. Sometimes he looks great, like a world beater, and then sometimes he just looks terrible. But Nascimento is very limited sample size, so only 14 minutes of octagon time. That's a concern when I'm trying to draw a conclusion from the data. But we do know that he has a history of submissions, and he is more likely to take this to the ground. Boser does not have a single takedown attempt in his entire UFC career, so we're not going to see that today or tomorrow. But I actually like Boser here because the head strike defense of Nascimento is awful. It's one of the worst on the card. So he does get hit, and he has been dropped twice in not that many fights. So if that's a liability, Boser does hit pretty hard. He swings hard. He's one of those guys, he doesn't have a lot of volume, but when he swings, he's going all in. So I think eventually he catches him. Now, on the flip side, I like Boser, and I'm even willing to lay juice for him. But Nascimento does have that ground potential, and Boser without a ground game, that's a liability. So if you're looking for one of those inside the distance props, throw that in there. There's clearly finishing potential on both sides.
And you see here, and this is normally odd for a 3-round fight, but you understand with heavyweights, it is juiced over, but 1.5 rounds at minus $1.40. Do you think it could get done that quickly, Reed, that the under at plus $1.10 is in play? Or is that right kind of set properly at 1.5, not 2.5?
With these guys, I would actually be careful. I would go inside the distance, even if that costs you a little bit. Because first of all, knockouts those can happen anytime, any round. You maximal strength, people still can fire one off and land it. Submissions, of course, get harder and harder as the fight goes on. But this is a situation where if Boser gasses and he gets put in a bad spot, he probably doesn't have the experience in ground game to stand up to a BJJ guy. So that's a concern also. So I wouldn't mess with 1.5. I would probably give myself a little bit more time to work.
All right, good advice there. Let's get to the prelims here. In the last prelim on the card is an interesting one between Pat Sabatini and Damon Jackson here. Sabatini, almost a $2 favorite. Not huge favorites on this card here. All pretty well priced, either $2 or less on most of these fights here. Now down to $1.80. What do you make of Sabatini in this spot?
Yeah, Sabatini is a little bit better in a lot of places. He's a better striker. He is a more aggressive grappler than Damon Jackson. And I say that with my eyebrows raised because Jackson is one of those guys who looks like he just wants to backpack you for 15 minutes. And he has done that very effectively. He's very good on the ground in maintaining control. But when he is in stand-up situations, it's kind of a liability. So while Sabatini should have the stand-up advantage, I also will bank on the fact that he has very good wrestling and should be able to keep Jackson off of his back, hopefully. So that gives me advantages in two spots. And so, yes, I agree with him as the favorite. I actually think there's still value there in the price. So Sabatini is who I'm backing. I've been hurt by Jackson before, but that was a situation where I actually knew it was going to be a tough matchup for Charles Rosa. And I was actually almost warning them, whoa, when we look at all the opponents that you could fight, this is actually not one of the ones that you should fight. And Damon Jackson made him pay for that, even though it was kind of a wild fight at the end. But Damon Jackson, yeah, he is like a leech on the mat. Sabatini, though, I'm hoping he has the wrestling chops to avoid that.
All right. So, again, a lot of these prices that you've pointed out, a lot of these fights and these prices are affordable. You're not laying huge numbers here with some of these favorites. Reed, it was great having you back out here in Sin City last weekend. Come on back out. We'd love to have you on set and certainly watching the fights together. Enjoy the fights this weekend and safe travels. I'm so jealous of your Barcelona trip. Have a lot of fun, Reed will. Come on back with Britton Hess, producer extraordinaire, next right here on First Strike on VSiN, the Sports Betting Network. Continue First Strike here on VSiN. Dave Ross here at Circus Sportsbook in Las Vegas, and what a pleasure it is to get him from behind the glass, Britton Hess, and come out here to get Britton Hess, our producer extraordinaire, get Britton's bombs before we say goodnight for this show. Britton, it's great to have you back out. Like Lou Finocchiaro and I were talking, You're as sharp as anybody that we have on this network when it comes to this sport. So, we don't take it lightly when we have you out here because I know you've got some really good leans that you've seen in this fight card. I want to talk about the co-main event a little bit, and it is an intriguing matchup with Chidi against RoboCop here. You look at these big bangers, and we know that Chidi's got the height and the reach advantage, right? Well, the height is the same as 6'3", but he does have a reach advantage of a couple inches. What style of fight do you think we see? Is it fireworks from the jump, or could potentially we see a feeling out process?
Well, if you've watched Gregory Rodriguez, fireworks from the jump is probably how it's going to go. And Chidi
normally,
and Njokuani is one of the most explosive guys, so I think that this is going to be a stand and bang fight. Obviously, Rodriguez does have a history with jiu-jitsu, but he hasn't submitted anyone in the UFC. He hasn't submitted somebody, I think, in his last 8 fights or so. So I think that he knows what gets you paid in the UFC, which is knockouts. And I think that he knows that he has the power to do it, so he's happy to continue in those style of fights.
Well, and I see here, when I look at some of the notes that you've taken on this fight, that you look at Chidi, he's got 4 KOs in a row. RoboCop's got 4 KOs in his last 6. So, look, we don't give out bonuses, but it feels like this could be fight of the night written all over it as co-main event. And that's why you think the under is in play here, that at 1.5 rounds, potentially, this thing gets done earlier. Because sometimes you get these... they call him RoboCop for a reason. He's been in spots where he looks like he's almost out and somehow survives. He can hang in there. Do you think at under plus $1.05, is that in play for you, or do you think it goes 2?
I think it's in play. It's definitely in play. Chidi's last 2 fights, one ended at the very end of the first round. The one before that ended 17 seconds into the first round. And then Gregory Rodriguez has relentless pressure, solid hands, and tons of power. So I think it's viable. It's not necessarily my favorite way to play this. I actually was looking deep in the prop board at DraftKings, and I saw something I like a little bit more, which is just both these guys have KO power. They both want KOs. They both want highlights. They both, will charge forward. Chidi's actually a really good counter puncher. And you know what I mean? When it's like that, when both guys just need to connect once to end the fight, I don't necessarily want to choose a side or choose a win via KO for either guy unless you want to take both of them.
Yeah.
But you can do the math, but I think the prop that DraftKings has available of the fight ends via KO, regardless of who does it, minus 135 is a great way to get into this fight. I don't think anybody wants to box. I don't think Rodriguez is going to be scared enough to say, I need to lean on my grappling to get through this. I think that, just finding a prop that's fight ends via KO, and I know a lot of the sports books with the deeper menus offer that prop, and at minus 135, I would feel confident taking that.
Britton, I love that angle because because this could be so wild a fight, it might be harder to get a read on who's going to get the KO, but it feels like somebody's going to sleep at some point. So instead of playing necessarily the round prop at 1.5, right, because we don't know if it's coming early or coming late, you might want to go ahead and take that KO prop at minus $1.35. I think I'm with you. I don't see this fight hitting the cards. I'd be stunned. It's plus $1.80 that it goes to the cards. So to your advantage there in your line of thinking, it might be a much smarter way to play it. If you don't want to pick the side, just figure out somebody might be going to sleep at minus $1.35. I think there's really good value there. Let's get to the main event here. And from talking to our experts here throughout the hour here in First Strike, it's kind of where I've been all week, that Cory Sandhagen, just with the experience factor of being 30 versus Song Yadong at 24 in a potentially 5-round fight, that he's going to have some built-in advantages because Yadong just hasn't been there, done that. Normally, we like the younger fighters, right, in MMA, because we go, well, there's a reason why, old man, take a look at my life. It normally doesn't end well when you're getting older, but Cory's still in his heyday here at 30. How do you look at the age differential here? Is it an actual advantage for Cory being the experienced fighter versus the young up-and-comer at 24?
So he's younger. He's only 24, but he's got 26 pro fights as opposed to 18 on Cory's side. Yadong's first pro fight was in 2013, so if he's 24 now, 9 years, how is he fighting as a young teenager professionally overseas? It just makes it interesting because, obviously we talk about the strength of schedule and not all records are the same.
Right.
So, he was, as a young teenager, fighting professionally, somewhere overseas. That means that, he probably wasn't fighting against UFC caliber opponents as much as Sandhagen was.
Right.
But at the same time, he's comfortable in an octagon. But I do think the angle of this being a main event 5-round fight might be a bigger factor than some people realize.
So possibly here, you're looking at a live dog scenario with Yadong here again. Not a huge underdog. Like most of these fights, and we're going to get to one of your bigger upsets that you might potentially see in the card. But really, they've been kind of affordable, if you will, for favorites. But you actually think Yadong here, this could be maybe a coming out party for him?
I think he has a chance. So the way they're trending, Yadong is getting all the hype. I think Lou referred to UFC would love to have a champion from China again. Just because obviously it's such a huge market. And there's a lot of potential UFC fans over there, and they'll support their guy if he's got the belt. And like I said, Cory's come off 2 decision losses. Two tip of the spear guys, and TJ Dillashaw and Peter Yan. But I think Yadong's trending up. I think he's got a chance. I mean, I don't necessarily want to rush to bet him right now. We'll see where the numbers go tomorrow if he becomes a bigger dog. Because I think most casual fans know Sandhagen's name much better than they know Song Yadong. So that might affect the numbers by the time the fights get off tomorrow. But at the same time, I think that coming off of 2 decision wins, people are thinking, Sandhagen's a slow plotter trying to point fight his way through this. And Yadong has a decent amount of decisions in his career. I think he's got 8 in 19 wins. He's got 8 KOs as well. I actually think the total is kind of interesting to attack here. I think Dan Vreeland said the same thing. Yadong fought a 5-round fight it was many years ago. So it was in 2017. Yeah, he's not going to be used to going, the full 5 here. And Cory obviously has. So I worry about gas tanks, but I also worry about Cory wanting to finish inside the distance. Put on a show because he just lost 2 decisions. One of them was a split, very close with TJ Dillashaw. And
good plus value there, plus $1.35 if you like the under 4.5 rounds here. And I do understand that rationale that Song Yadong, maybe the bright lights of being a main event for the first, it's a little bit much. Cory's trying to put on a show. So sometimes when you have those situations, these guys don't pace themselves maybe adequately because they're trying to put on that proverbial show for the big boss, Dana White, and that's what he likes. He likes finishes. So if you do get a finish here inside of 4.5 rounds, a good plus price there. I mentioned that the majority of this card, Britton, is pretty well priced, if you will, for some of the favorites. But I think you've identified a big dog on this card that you might actually find some value in, and that's almost a $4 dog that you see here.
Well, one thing I always do when I'm looking at a fight card is I look at guys. I click on their record, see where they were fighting, how long they've been in the UFC, how many fights they've had, and I see a giant favorite in Joseph Pyfer.
Okay.
Minus 415, minus 420, 450. It might be steamed up in the parlays, minus 500 tomorrow. It's showing 460 at DraftKings right now. I think that you look at his experience. He won in the Contender Series, so good for him. That's always a nice way to start. He got a KO in the second round. And he's going against Alan Amedovski, who's got knocked out in the first 2 rounds, or he got knocked out and submitted in the first 2 rounds of his last 2 fights, and lost 3 in a row in the UFC after being undefeated on the back 8-0 on the back of 2 Bellator wins, which is the second greatest organization in mixed martial arts.
It is
not really close as far as competitive, but it's number 2.
But still,
it's still number 2. So there's some dog in him. He's shown the ability to win fights, and usually with his hands, he's got a lot of KOs. And I think Pyfer is more of a grappler. He looks like a supermodel, like body, physique. He's totally jacked. He's gonna look.
He's gonna look the part.
The eye test. Every fan who's watching is like, oh man, I need to put this guy in the parlay when they see him walk out. But Amedovski, he's in a situation. He's gonna be cut if he loses this fight. You can't go 0-4, getting finished 2-3 times in a row. I think that if you're getting almost 4-1 on him, it's worth a flyer because he's got so much experience, and it's another age gap, right? So he's obviously way older. It's 25 versus 34.
Yeah.
And obviously, usually younger fighters win. But I just think this price is a bit out of hand.
Wow.
And I think the strength is the guys that Amedovski's fought are way better, way more experienced. He's lost a lot to his last 3 fights after being 8-0. But Pyfer's record, the guys he fought before that, a lot of them have under 10 fights. He's got exactly 10 pro fights. So I don't think that I think that Amedovski knows that he needs to take care of business. He can finish in the first round, but I think at 4-1, a veteran has a swinging chance.
Possibly a live dog scenario there. I'm going to put you on the spot in 30 seconds. We haven't talked a lot about the Anthony Hernandez, Marc-Andre Barot fight. You're looking at Fluffy at a minus 210 favorite. I mentioned most of the cards around that price. What do you make of him as that big a favorite? Do you think that's right? That's appropriately priced?
So I think that it's a high price, but I think Barriot has fought twice this year. He got KO'd in February of this year. Obviously it's been a while since then, but he fought again. He took some hits versus Jordan Wright. So I worry about his chin. I think Hernandez is a really good grappler, as we saw him with Rodolfo Vieira. But I think that I would pair Hernandez in a parlay before I take Barriot.
Britton, great stuff as always. Appreciate you, man. Want to thank Lou Finocchiaro, Dan Vreeland, Reed Kuhn, and of course, Britton Hess. Enjoy the fights, everybody. We'll see you next week right here on VSiN, the Sports Betting Network.